Welcome back to Windows and Mirrors, a podcast produced by the Division of Equity and Inclusion. Ben Perez is the manager of UC Berkeley's Campus Access Services, providing services that make it possible for everyone with disabilities to participate in university-sponsored, non-course-related programs and activities. In this episode, Ben shares stories from his childhood, talks about how he became disabled, and his coming-out journey. This is his story.
Somebody gave me a quote that I couldn't attribute correctly. It's, being an adult is the act of getting over your childhood, right? And it's just something that I think all of us can deal with at different times and places in different ways. So, I'm not trying to say that everybody's childhood is inherently traumatic, but it shapes you a lot. So, my father's side of the family is all from Puerto Rico, and my mom is from England. And two things were really common in my household: caffeine, and not talking about stuff. So when I was 12 or 13, it was 7th grade. When I started 7th grade, I was kind of told when I woke up, okay, it's time to make your own breakfast. No breakfast? No, you can reach everything. We see you on Saturday mornings. You know how to cook. You're good. We promise. And then my dad said, this is coffee and this will help. And he showed me how to make coffee, which I thought therefore was how everybody made coffee, but he made a triple espresso. He put a little bit of milk into it, and he said, this is coffee. Damn. And so that was my introduction to coffee and to caffeine. And then British. It's not a joke that in British folk drink tea at all times. For everything, for every type of, I can't find my keys and we need to leave the house immediately. I know what will solve this: a pot of tea. No, we're already late. You need your keys. Well, yes, but if we haven't, and so that's the caffeine, and then the not talking about, it was just a pattern of avoiding difficult conversations because they're hard, but also because there's just not the cultural language to really talk about it sometimes. My parents were really open and very accepting as people, and I'm very lucky in a lot of ways that I had such an open and accepting household. But it was also very easy to not address emotional challenges within myself when they came up, and I got very good at avoiding it. When we spoke last time, but I spoke a little bit about. I am a person with a very visible physical disability. I'm a quadriplegic. I use a power wheelchair. I couldn't hide my disability if I tried. It's literally like a 200-pound piece of equipment that I need to get around. So I became disabled when I broke my neck when I was 16, and it was because children are silly. And always will be, but particularly in my experience, young men who are trying to prove masculinity are really silly creatures, because we think we're invincible, and even if we don't actually think we're invincible, we like other people to, because that helps build up those stereotypes that we're trying to foster in ourselves and to foster in the minds of others about us to make us feel good about those things. One of the things that I didn't get to tell you a little bit was that, I bet that if I hadn't broken my neck, I would have come out of the closet a lot earlier. Because at a certain point, it can be kind of hard to avoid. I think for some people, and it was probably true for me, that at a certain point, I just would have wanted to express my actual wants and desires, and either would have gotten caught or somebody would have figured it out. Because I'm not that slick. I've never have been. I like to pretend I am, but I'm not. But the accident delayed that question. I was on a double date with my best friend and his girlfriend and a girl that I wanted to be with when it happened. And after the accident, we started dating, this girl and I, and we dated for the rest of high school. And it was not that I didn't care for this person. which just wasn't really what I wanted and what I needed from a relationship, from a partner. But yeah, so the accident let me push stuff off. I think some conversations with myself and with my friends that really needed to happen, but also just it allowed me to focus on this other trauma instead of the thing that was really lingering underneath. I remember crying one night at home with my mom, and I was just saying, I was bawling. I was saying, I just miss being able to just do what I want. Just when I would just to have any agency to get up and do stuff. And she's also crying. So I know I used to hear you and your friends leaving the house, and I realized like, oh, we were going out to get drunk, or like we were going out to cause problems. She could hear us. Again, it was just all kind of funny to me, but it let me ignore some of that by maintaining that sense of humor. I went from high school straight to Berkeley. I was accepted as a freshman. I don't know why they accepted me. I think that at the time I felt like I felt like my academic record was okay, but not of a quality to wind up at a school like this. One of the things that I think a lot of people of a lot of different backgrounds, particularly marginalized backgrounds of really any kind, end up feeling, and I don't mean everybody, but I've spoken to a lot of students at this point as a staff member, and a lot of people think that they were kind of tokenized in their acceptance to the university, and I certainly felt that way. I was like, oh, I get it. Well, here's your token disabled person. Good on you, Berkeley. Pat on the back. I'm going to drown. Like, that was my immediate thought. Like, I'm going to take the class. This is going to go so badly. But you can't say no. I mean, I could have, but, but I didn't want to. So I came up to Berkeley. And again, this is 2 years after I broke my neck. I really hadn't even stopped to process what was going on, just on a daily basis. So, as I told you when we were here, I had kind of a rough couple of years leading in through my first, I kind of call it like Berkeley 1.0, and then there was Berkeley 2.0. The first version of it was rough. I don't think that so I was always a kind of, I was always a really impatient person. I was the guy that was like tapping their foot in a classroom, and I jump really easily. I'm very startleable, and I'm very excitable. I didn't learn how to read until I was in the third grade. All sorts of weird little quirks. And when I got to Berkeley, one of the disabled students program staff members said, have you ever heard of ADHD? Like, well, of course I've heard about it. It's like, she said, have you ever considered that maybe ADHD has been playing a role in some of the issues that you're describing? And so what one of the characteristics of my time with ADHD is that I either really love something and do it like 150%, or I really don't care. And that applied to classes very much. So I'd get like an A and an F in a semester, all while not paying attention to my health because I wanted to ignore my disability because I was so excited by all the things that were going on. Or, I'd pass a class but really not have learned anything while getting completely absorbed in, the politics of the housing environment that I was living in or some other thing, right? And then all while ignoring my disability needs. And that's when I started dating, arguably one of the people that I'm closest to in the world. There was a woman who was a student here as well. And at some point, it was like 21 or so, just turned 21. I kind of had this realization that I cared about this person so much that I didn't feel like I could honestly represent myself in a relationship with her that was supposed to be sexual or romantic. And I remember having to tell her and the first person ever to say out loud that I was gay, and it was one of the scariest things I've ever done. And one of the things that was so silly about it in hindsight is that I think that through all of the trauma of my disability and of going through those changes, which were really traumatic, and I don't want to underplay that is something that, whether you're born with a disability or you have an injury and acquire something, it's difficult to understate how much it affects everything about you. I really think that for me, the bigger trauma was my sexuality and was repressing it. I don't know why I was so good at ignoring that. I don't know why I spent all those years not paying attention to it. But that was it. And so pretty much right after that, everything came to a head. All of the years spent ignoring my disability caught up with me, and I had to stop and actually take care of myself. So I had to withdraw from school and deal with some medical procedures that required, basically, 3.5 months in bed, in recovery, and that was a time to really figure out what I wanted and how I identified in certain ways. After I came out, I really lost touch with some of those friends that I was really close with in high school. This group of people that really drove me to try to get back into the swing of stuff. And I don't remember why. I don't get the impression that any of the people that I was spending time with were particularly uncomfortable around or resentful towards homosexuality, but for some reason, that was a catalyst. We stopped talking, and at this time, going through all these medical procedures and spending all this time basically on bed rest, I remember reaching out and then not hearing anything back. And in hindsight, I was trying to say hey, I'm sorry, I don't even really remember why we stopped talking. And I thought, I think that at the time I thought I really couldn't be gay and have some of these friends. It's a really silly thought, I think, but that was really important to me because these were particularly some of my straight male friends from that time. And so it almost felt and I don't think it's true, but it almost felt validating. Oh, I get it. Okay. So that was it. I need to let go of this stuff. But more importantly, I needed to accept the fact that, yes, I had a disability. I have to take care of it. It requires that I do things that aren't the best. I can't stay out till 2 every night, or really ever, if I want somebody to put me in bed consistently afterwards. If I'm too drunk, then it messes with everything, right? So I can't go to a raging college party and do what I want there, because if I'm too intoxicated to manage myself, then I become everyone else's problem. Because now I've got this power wheelchair, and I've it's not cute. Nobody knows what to do. I have to manage myself, right? And I had to learn that was more important than really anything else. But part of that is understanding who you are. Understanding that for me, gender plays an important role in a partner that I want to be with. That's a hard thing to accept for some people, and it was a hard thing to accept for me. And again, for some reason, it was a harder thing to accept and to internalize than anything to do with my disability. I always used to call myself the cripple in front of everybody. It was just totally fine. It was funny to me. It was hilarious. No problem at all. But saying I'm gay was not a comfortable thing for a very long time, and it just happened that way. So at some point in there, I met somebody who I started dating, and it was probably it was my first serious boyfriend, really. Serious. That's a hard thing to define, right? I remember not usually having disclosed to people even then that I was gay unless they asked. It wasn't something that came up. And so when I started bringing him around, people were like, what? What's going on here? I was like, well, didn't ask. But, and we've been together since. We got engaged last year, and so that's a fun thing. But it took a lot of time to feel comfortable. This past Sunday, we marched in the Pride Parade in San Francisco. It was the first time I've been to Pride every year since I came up from LA, partially because I was curious, but also because it used to be a giant street party, and that's just kind of fun in general. But I never thought I would march in a parade with, holding hands with my partner, who is there with me in front of. There were news cameras, for Christ's sake. I don't know who took our picture, but it was great fun to do it with, just under 1,000 other people from UC Berkeley who either are allies or LGBT community members themselves, with the director of the Gender Equity Resource Center as one of the community grand marshals for the Pride Parade itself. And I've known Billy since I was a student, and so it was just a very interesting full circle to come.
Ben, along with the rest of DSP staff, strives to create a university environment universally accessible to all, regardless of their relative level of ability. Currently, more than 2,800 people, including students, faculty, and staff, use campus access services. If you'd like to learn more information of the services, visit their website at access.berkeley.edu. This has been another episode of Windows and Mirrors. I'm your host, Gabriel Gonzalez, and thanks for listening.